Hi, I'm James Eade, and I'm your temporary host for Modern Investing by Sasha Starr. He's normally your host, as you know. However, he's attending to a personal matter right now. He may be able to join us later, but right now you're stuck with me and my impression about what's going on in the investment world today. And as we know, we're still trying to get a Speaker of the House and that has caused some distress. The distress in markets don't like uncertainty. So we're having a rough day in the market today. Normally Wednesday is a good day, but we're seeing a lot of red today. And there's a couple of reasons for that. The main reason that I see is that we're involved in earnings. We're sensitive to earnings, and companies are coming out, like Google came out with disappointing earnings, and that affected the tech sector in general. So we're seeing a broad sweep in the tech industry that's downward pressure. We're also still waiting about interest rates. Are they going to be increased, or is the increase of the interest rates going to stop? And we're not sure if that's true. And there's always a little lag between when they stop the interest rates and then the earnings start to, percolate upwards. So there's still some uncertainty about that. And we're in those months that are generally fairly volatile. September, October, November. I'm usually on the sidelines during these months, but I would like to bring on Milan get a Canadian perspective since Sasha's not here. Milan, how are you today?
Much better than I used to be. I don't think that our viewers know I was involved in a car accident. I was riding my bicycle. I plowed into a car, did a lot of damage to the car, and it was my fault. And probably if you live long enough, sooner or later, you're going to have some sort of an accident. So yeah, I'm okay now. And the way Rosie is looking after me, I don't want to get better. Now, My perspective, here's my perspective, James. What you said so far is bang on. And I could do a similar thing for Canada, but there's a much bigger issue here. And that has to do with the what they call the Davos of the desert. Saudi Arabia has been hosting a meeting where the world's most renowned financiers attend. And so Saudi Arabia has a sovereign wealth fund of close to $800 billion. And they want to get away from their dependence on oil. So they're hosting this event annually. And that has a much greater impact on what's happening on the markets than anything that you and I can say about the Speaker of the House or the Canadian issues. So now I follow the put-call ratio, which shows how investors generally feel. The market is up year to date, but it's down almost 2.5% for the week. It's down 2.5% for the month. And the put-call ratio is negative for the week. It's negative for the month. And it's negative for the year. Things are not looking very good. So the best place, for instance, the world's top financiers are pessimistic about the global economy because of what's happening in Israel and Hamas. And so the general consensus there is that that's the biggest threat to the economy than anything else. And so that would include the World Bank president, Ajay Banga, and who we got here also, CEO of BlackRock, Lawrence Fink, and JP Morgan's Jamie Dimon, and Goldman Sachs' David Solomon, and Citigroup's Jane Fraser, she's British. All those people who are the world's top financiers universally agree that the market is going to collapse. And the best place to be in a case of market collapse is the US dollar. A lot of people may not like it, but the US dollar is backed by the largest economy in history. And it is a global reserve fund. So given that, there is no other place. If you don't like the US dollar, where are you going to go?
Right.
If you take a look at what's happening in real estate, the Case-Shiller Index, which monitors housing in 20 cities, it has over the years equaled about a half of what the S&P 500 has returned. And when you take a look at office buildings, the scenario is even worse because so many people now working from home that a lot of these bank towers that reach up to the sky are only partly occupied, and likely to remain partially occupied because working from home can be very convenient. Some companies want their people to show up at the office once or twice a week because what happens at the water cooler can be pretty significant. So for that reason, some of them want to return. But the real estate is not a good investment, neither commercial nor residential, compared to hasn't been for years and years and years. The S&P 500 is done almost twice as well as the 20 cities that the Case-Shiller Index follows. So really, what I did just before my accident is I got out of the market and got into cash 100%. And then I had my accident. So I wasn't able to do anything, which is ideal because...
and your beautiful wife is taking care of you. So it's the best of all worlds.
I think Eugene Fama said that investing, your portfolios are like a bar of soap. The more you handle them, the less you have.
Yes.
So thanks to my accident, I wasn't able to do anything.
Yes.
And so when the market has been collapsing ever since that for the last couple of weeks. It's down today. Never mind that it's Wednesday, it's down. And like I said, the put-call ratio is negative for the week, negative for the month, negative for the year.
Right.
And all these financiers who are the world's top financiers universally agree. You know, generally, you have to have some disagreement for markets to operate.
Yes.
Somebody has to like a stock to buy it, and somebody has to dislike a stock to sell it. There's universal agreement now that the market was going to collapse, as it has historically in the past. Generally, the market has been the best place to invest, generally speaking, compared to silver and gold and stamps and you name it. But every once in a while, it drops by 30%. And we may be facing such an event now because, like I said, the put-call ratio is negative for a whole year from now. So the place to be is the American dollar. You don't like the American dollar, what's the alternative?
When you say the negative for the year, you don't just mean the calendar year closing in December. You mean for a year from now?
A year from now. The put-call ratio a year from now is negative, suggesting it describes how investors feel.
And when you talk about a collapse, you're talking about a 25%, 30%? 25%,
30%, that has happened before. And it will again, of course. And so we may be facing one of those times. So now,
and what that would tell me is that it's a buying opportunity. So if you're
you're right about that, James. You know, we talk about there is a man, a dentist actually, who did really well in the market, and he also studied with Warren Buffett's mentor, and he said, keep your money 50% in cash. When the market drops 10%, take a third of your money and buy the market, by buying SPY, let's say. The market drops another 10%, put all your money into the market. If the market borrows and drops another 10%, borrow. So now it's important for us not to have in the market the money that we're going to need next year or so.
Absolutely. Or for the rent or anything like that.
For all these things, so that money doesn't belong in the market. But if we keep that in mind, the market has been the best place to invest for over 100 years now. The U.S. market, I've got to be careful about that. Not the DAX, the German market, not the Japanese market. The Chinese market has been touted a great deal.
Or the Vancouver Exchange.
Vancouver Exchange, that used to be mostly penny stocks and mining stocks. And so the Chinese, who have reported unbelievable results, The Economist, no less a publication than The Economist, said you cannot trust Chinese numbers. So what I personally done, and I recommend everybody do, is stay in the US dollar until the market drops sufficiently to commit some funds to it. It has now dropped about 2.5% for the month, and 2.5%. Year to date, the market is up. The market is up year to date, but for the month is down 2.5%, and for the week is down about 2.5%. So we have to wait for it to drop closer to 10% before we do anything.
Milan, when you say get into the U.S. dollar, how do you specifically? How do you do that? Do you buy mutual funds? Do you buy that are dollar?
No, just cash or near cash.
Okay, so
Cash or
money
near cash.
market kind of things.
Yeah. Hey, Jim and Milan, just really quickly, I popped in and
hi,
everything,
Mark.
and I was teasing earlier. So I was teasing about your accident, and you were saying that you're getting that great care from loved ones and all in that space. So that is amazing. But I have a friend, I actually saw them earlier today. They were scooting around and all along those lines because they have one of those lovely electronic bikes, a young
Oh,
lady
yeah.
from Brazil and all in that space. I know they're very popular there in California. So
I
as
see
an
them all the time,
investment
yeah.
tool and everything, would you invest in those? Because I know they're not cheap and everything. So I was wondering, should people be investing in these companies? Like I know even here in North Carolina, we've got the scooters that people can, not the bigger scooters like she has, but the smaller ones that you can rent, like Lime. And I think there's another one called Acorn and a number of other ones that you can rent. And there are a number of those companies that were very popular to help people get around in certain dense areas in terms of city life and everything. So, Jim,
Well,
are you invested in any of those companies?
Yeah, the answer to that, Mark, is a very definite answer. There are no opinions about this. A very definite answer. That is that the success of the company depends more on the management than the product that it's serving. So, for instance, can you make money, for instance, selling buggy whips today? I mentioned that earlier. Yes, you can.
Yeah.
Oh, there are people, the Amish and the Hutterites and so on, they still drive buggies and they need whips. And those whips have to be well made. And so there's a competition among buggy whip makers. So if the buggy whip manufacturing company is well managed, you can invest in buggy whips and make money. Now, generally speaking, what you're suggesting, because you're suggesting that we invest in an area, that's unreliable. For example, the example I frequently use is what computers are today used to be railroads in the last end of the 19th century. And before that, it was automobiles. When Henry Ford started his automobile company, there were more than 2,000 automobile companies, more than 2,000. So should we invest in automobiles? Great idea. Which company? Which company? That's the thing. Because out of the 2,000 companies, by 2008, only 3 survived. And of the 3, 2 went bankrupt. Could you have picked out Ford in the late 19th century? I doubt it. No. So these electric bikes that you're talking about, well, first of all, I know some people who have them, and people tend to think they're getting exercise, but they're not. The electric bike is doing most of the work. Yes. And very often, a medical doctor friend of mine, is coming on her electric bike, and her dog is going to trot beside the bike. The dog will get the exercise. She will think she is getting the exercise. So as a group, investing in the electric bikes, your success of that approach will depend on picking the right company. And picking the right company, it will depend more on the management than anything else. So are we able to check out managers? I think we can. You can take a look at the list of managers, people in the corner office, the C-suite type of people, and see what they've done previously with their lives. And that way, and I don't think many people do that, but that's the way to invest in electric bikes or buggy whips or anything else.
My feeling, Mark, is that you go to travel in Europe and you see that bikes are a way of life. And in the United States, cars are a way of life.
Yeah.
And will this change? Yes. And will it change overnight? No. This is going to take a long time before it becomes something that you are customarily used to seeing. But there is this change in going on across, as Milan was saying earlier. People are working remotely now, and they're not having to do all this commuting. And when commuting starts to ease up, then electric bikes become safer. And so we will see gradually over time a change in our environment.
Yeah, you're right, James. And let me make a comment about bikes in Europe. If you take a look at the countries that have a bike culture, like say Holland or many of the Scandinavian countries, none of them are wearing helmets. Hello, none of them are wearing helmets.
Yeah.
Why are they not wearing helmets? Well, I'll tell you, are you wearing a helmet walking on the sidewalk? You're not. Why not? Because walking on the sidewalk is so safe.
Safe.
In the countries that have the bicycle culture, riding a bike is so safe you don't need a helmet. They have lanes particularly devoted to bicycles. Bicycles have the right of way. A stop sign to a cyclist in Holland is really a yield sign. A red light is really a yield sign. And so they're so separated from automobile traffic, they don't need that helmet like you don't.
I was walking in Vienna and I got yelled at by someone on a bicycle. And the person I was with is living in Vienna at the time. And she told me, that I was committing some offense. And I was oblivious to it. But everybody there was like, obviously he's a tourist.
but Jim, aren't you talking about something that could be a lost job? Because you talk about jobs that can be lost, and we talked about it on this show and other shows before around what AI is doing. But as you just mentioned, anybody can have a industry. Milan, you mentioned the buggy whip, and that there are parts of society, be it the Amish or others, that might still need the buggy. And my question is, if we get into this bike culture that y'all are talking about, and then the helmet makers might not be needed to be made, because right now there's a whole push around people buying helmets and creating helmets and all that. Because even from a health standpoint, people are always wanting the kids to have helmets and to be protected. So I'm thinking that the helmet industry could be a lost industry if we go the direction that y'all are thinking about going.
Mark, what you say leads me to bring up the subject of the evils of the Adam Smith type of free market economy. The free market economy, a la Adam Smith, has created more wealth than any other economy in history. It has taken more people out of poverty than any other approach to investing, but it does have its dark side. And the automobile industry is a great example of that. Detroit was able to remove streetcar tracks from every city in North America except San Francisco and Toronto. Now, a streetcar can replace 40 cars, maybe 60 cars, right? So Detroit would rather see 60 cars on the road than one streetcar. So they have seen to it that the streetcar tracks are removed from every city except Toronto and San Francisco.
Well,
so that's
ironically, Milan, that is, we talked about on this show and other shows before, this notion of mass transit and kind of this new mass transit plan, kind of like the rail system that exists in Europe. So like fast rail, light rail is what it's called and everything. And I can tell you that here in North Carolina, where I'm based at, that is actually what they are thinking about using, because the rail systems that were existing still exist. They've just been covered up. So the rail systems actually still exist. They are actually not being used. So one of the things that they have floated out there is to revamp and redesign the existing rail, because there is existing rail that exists here, just like in other places as well. So they've talked about either building new rail or using the existing rail.
Singapore is a great example of public transportation that's very effective. If you miss a bus, there'll be another one just a couple of minutes later. And in Singapore, for you to own a car, you have to pay a huge amount of money just for the right to own a car. Something like $100,000 gives you the right to buy a car. You haven't bought it yet. You just bought the right to buy one. Yeah. So who's going to buy a car with that type of punitive approach to car ownership when public transportation is so good?
Right. And London and New York are going through all of these trials and tribulations about congestion, and how are they going to respond to it, and how are they going to penalize people that are adding to it. And so this is another thing. But I wanted to bring up, and it's not just the automakers that were in favor of creating an America that had a car mentality, but Goodyear was also very involved in laying out our highway system, because they were a rubber company. and you need tires to drive your automobiles. So
Jim, there was another industry as well, though, that was very much a part of it. Unfortunately, it's kind of like we were talking about with the helmets. It is a dying industry, and I hate to say it's part of the dying industry and everything, but I know here in North Carolina, I know y'all still got them out there in California, but as part of that car mentality, wasn't there this lovely thing called drive-in movies and everything along those lines? So definitely that was part of what was going on as well. So there was the drive-in movies, and like I said, there are a few that still exist here. They've been sometimes converted to
bring back the drive-in movies
kind of thing. So they've been converted to different kind of things. So I want to say that there is one of them that is now like it's not a mall, but it's kind of like a pawn shop area, and they're definitely free market things that are going on there. So like a food co-op kind of space. I'm trying to think of the name for them. A farmer's market, kind of like a farmer's market space. That's what I was looking for and everything. But they've definitely been converted because we know we don't like to just waste the land. If the land's not going to have the movie theater, we got to put something there. So maybe it'll be a farmer's market or something else. They've even been turned into malls.
But we're talking about now in the short term, we're thinking about moving your money into the U.S. dollar, and we're thinking about a time frame. For example, let me just ask this question and state my practice, which has been be on the sidelines during these months. But when the clock turns and it's January, I start to look because there has usually been a sell-off in December and volatility preceding that, and I always seem to find bargains in January. And do you think, Milan, based on what you're seeing for the put-call ratios and things like that, that even this year, that January would be a stay on the sidelines kind of month?
I would feel comfortable staying on the sidelines. Yeah.
Yes.
And we have to have a difference of opinion, otherwise you wouldn't have a market.
Right.
So now, what Mark was talking about earlier, every major change results in someone being hurt by it. So, for instance, when they introduced weaving machines in late 19th century or late 18th century Britain, there are a lot of these people who are now going to lose their jobs. So the Luddites, who were led by a guy by the name of Ludd, L-U-D-D, opposed weaving machines for that reason. So you will always have someone who is going to be hurt by a major change. But collectively, we should be benefiting. For example, one of the things that a lot of people here, I live in a town that used to build ships. South Koreans would build a ship for a monthly income, which equals Collingwood shipbuilders' weekly income. And so we had to shut the shipyard down. And so what happened was percentage of the population, people working for the shipyard, were young enough to retrain.
Right.
Another group was sufficiently old to be able to retire a little bit early. There was a very small group who were neither old enough to retire nor young enough to learn something new, and they were hurt. And of course, they got government support that helped them. But there's an island from where I sit that's visible now that was not visible when the shipyard was operating because of pollution. We've got beavers in the water now, and we got fish in the water now, which didn't exist when the shipyard was employing most of the people in the town. So the shipyard closed. There was a lot of opposition to it. So every major change will hurt somebody. So you're right, Mark, in saying that the helmet manufacturers are going to be unhappy.
Hey, Milan, there are two industries I know that I'm here in North Carolina. I know that some of the other people with Pod TV are in North Carolina as well. North Carolina is actually known for a lot of industries. Definitely, we're known historically for tobacco, and there have been a couple of other crops that we were known for as well, including a little bit of cotton and even some other crops. And of course, a lot of people know about the hog industry here as well. But there is a major industry that you probably have in your house. I know that Jim has it in its house and all along those lines. And it is also known for that because it is seen as a center. There is a major event that goes on. If you have the things in your house, it's probably an item that is part of what I'm describing that North Carolina is known for. There's a little town called High Point that is seen as a capital of this particular industry. And we're going to come up because this is the end of October and everything. So Halloween's going to come up and Thanksgiving is going to come up. So in a little bit, we'll be in the Christmas season. And that is another industry that we are known for because there are these certain kinds of trees that everybody wants to have. And a lot of those trees come from North Carolina. They come from other places as well. So I'm just wondering, by my little bit of a soliloquy there, if you can guess which two industries I am talking about that this particular state are known for. And like I said, you probably might even be using one of them where you are sitting at and all along those lines. So I was wondering if you had any idea what those two industries were, because I understand that they're doing well stock-wise and in terms of
I don't know what those two industries are. Could one of them be tobacco?
No, Jim, do you have any idea what I was alluding to?
I was thinking timber.
Huh?
Timber.
Timber is part of it, but North Carolina is known actually,
Furniture.
particularly High Point, as the furniture capital. So it actually is one of the furniture capitals of the area. That's why I was alluding to that you're probably sitting in one with the chair and the desk and everything. But North Carolina has a very strong furniture market and has had it for a number of years. And the other one, people are going to be scrambling looking for them right after Halloween, and that is the Christmas tree. The Christmas tree is definitely, a lot of Christmas trees come from this particular area of North Carolina because they are evergreens, and there are a number of pines and evergreens that are here on a regular basis. So they definitely go, I think it's mostly in the mountain area, but they definitely cut down a lot of these evergreen trees, and that is your Christmas trees around the country. And I'm not saying that we're the only one, but definitely a number of them do come from the North Carolina area.
Now, how has the furniture industry been affected by, we call it here IKEA, in Sweden they call it IKEA. How has the furniture industry been affected by IKEA?
It was the first thought.
Go ahead, Jim.
I was saying it was my first thought is because that's what people buy up around where I live. You know, it's the IKEA stores that you see, and you know, so they price other people out of business, and you know, they're just omnipresent.
They're definitely omnipresent, but like I said, definitely it is gonna, even though they're omnipresent and there are a lot of people that go for that kind of discount prices and all along those lines, but there are a lot of people that like the fine craftsman type of furniture. So it is definitely not totally ruined the industry, and the industry has a major show that they do regularly. I want to say it's around this time of year, and there are people that come from all over the world, literally, to High Point. And High Point is a very small city. It is not a big city at all, but that is what it is.
But in general, Mark, what you're saying and what Milan was elaborating on is that, you know, with change comes displacement. And what we're seeing is a rapid series of changes. And in the past, we saw this change happen, but it was more or less gradual. Yeah. And now it's accelerated. It's taken off. And so we're seeing people that are you know, I can just tell you, even in the computer industry, I had people telling me and asking me in the 1990s, you know, I'm going to study to be a COBOL programmer. And I would say, no, because that's yesterday's programming language. Yeah. And you have to, you know, do this or that instead. And people would be training on things that were going to become obsolete. Or they would be trained to become in competition with people who had years, and they would be the newbie and they wouldn't get the jobs. And so this adjustment, this displacement, then adjustment, then the retraining, and the retraining has to be for something that will be valuable. And the government is not very good at identifying that. You know, so
if there's anybody else, I would say, James.
And I think even in industry, we lag behind, but there, you know, I was trained by AT&T, and I thought AT&T was one of those models of how to train their employees. Yeah. But there are very few companies that I would put up there with AT&T. But what they did is invest in research, and their research would inform their training, and they changed their training over time. I was responsible. I was a training supervisor at one period of time long ago. And we redid the entire introduction to data. We called it data processing. It was so long ago. We didn't call it IT. And we redid it entirely. And so this was ongoing type of mentality. You never live with the present. And
you adapt as well, because even when y'all were talking about it, I'm pretty sure that IKEA is involved in that activity because definitely, like I said, that town that I was referring to is known as the home furnishing capital of the world. I mean, it's literally trademarked that way as the home
Uh-huh.
furnishing capital of the world. And you can visit more than 100 furniture stores and outlets in High Point and surrounding areas. And you can design your perfect shopping getaway to furnish your entire home, or you can find those treasures. And they've got over 1,000 brands to choose
Probably,
from.
IKEA probably didn't build a store there.
Maybe not because they're home to the High Point World Market, the world's largest wholesale home furnishing show, open to retailers and design professionals. So they have 1,000 square feet of furniture. So I'm thinking that you can find some furniture at the world's largest furniture store, which is Furniture Land South. And they say they represent all major brands and styles. So maybe they do have some IKEA brands there as well, because they do say that they represent all the brands. I had some news. I was going to announce it to Sasha, but I'll announce it to Milan because I know that he's had some thoughts around it, and you've been kind of lukewarm about it in that space. But on my going back and forth trying to find guests and everything, I said that I had some personal friends that were involved in the space, but I've been reaching out, and I had somebody that is in the crypto and Bitcoin space. They have said that I believe it's either on the 11th or the 18th, whatever the Wednesday is, in about 2 or 3 weeks, that they are going to come on. Because I even told them, I said, now you do know that these are not crypto fans. There might be crypto doubters as well. And the gentleman was like, I don't care. I want to take them on, and all in that space. So there is a gentleman that's going to come on and talk to Milan and also talk to Sasha. Like I said, Jim, I know you've been a little bit more on the not so much neutral, but not totally discounted it. But yeah, there's a gentleman that I have reached out to that says that he is going to be onto this show. He ends it. I mean, talking mostly to his wife, because his wife is kind of his agent and everything, and she has been saying we're ready for y'all and all along those lines. So we are looking at a date in Wednesday. So he's going to come and try to sell us on crypto. So I was going to tell Sasha that, but I'm telling you on the air now, there is a gentleman that is coming on the air and is ready to take y'all on.
Sasha will be excited.
I'm going to ask James to comment on the cryptocurrencies, but I'd like to go back to Christmas trees.
Yes.
We have a Christmas tree. My wife and I have a Christmas tree which we have used for 20 years. Same tree. It looks real. You take it out of a box. You take it out of a box, and assembly. It doesn't take 5 minutes to assemble. And at the end of Christmas, it doesn't take 5 minutes to put it away. And so now there is an element, an important one, in harvesting Christmas trees where the whole family goes out and they pick a tree and they cut it down. And so that element, of course, is missing with what we're doing. But our kids are grown and gone, so that's not interesting anymore. But certainly prefabricated Christmas trees look damn good.
We have one too.
You have one too?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I swear by it. And but in any case, there might be some bah humbug part of me that swears by it, but I enjoy it, and it serves its purpose well.
You're talking about the natural trees or the regular Christmas tree? Because my mom has one of those that I think is not the she's bought the natural ones that I was referring to. There's actually a major organization that deals with people that are going through crisis in terms of like dealing with drugs and all in that space, and it's called an organization called TROSA, and they actually have a annual Christmas tree sale that does quite well. So they actually raise a bunch of money. They're also a moving company as well, so they do a lot of help in terms of treatment and all in that space. But they have some of these people learning new skills and new trades. So I know that some of them do moving. They even move from the East Coast to the West Coast on some of their trips. But they also have a very popular Christmas tree and a popular thrift store as well. So they do a number of things.
I would buy from them. Yeah.
No.
But getting back to crypto, Mark, what's in the news now? Somebody's going to trial, isn't there? Isn't that the big news in crypto now?
There is that news, and I'm sure that Mr. Wiseness, I believe that is his name, will have some thoughts around that. But yeah, there have been all kinds of crypto news, and I'll try to pull that up. But yeah, like I said, I've been back and forth.
Because what we're talking about is essentially fraud and getting into something that you don't know anything about, and somebody exploiting you. And oh my goodness, I've lost all my money.
Yeah.
So the U.S. dollar seems like a safer bet to me.
I'd like to get back to something that Mark brought up. We have 3 MBAs in the family, and they were all told that by the time they finish their job and are ready to retire, they will have worked for 10 companies. Mm-hmm. Because people who create MBAs expect that sort of a thing to be happening. What I'd like to know, from you, James, and from you, Mark, is can innovation replace manufacturing? People who are in manufacturing hate their work. They hate Mondays. They love Fridays. They don't like what they're doing. It doesn't matter. There's a Japanese automobile manufacturer. I'm not sure which company it is, but they keep people working in one station for a week. Then they move them to another station to give them some variety. And so people would wind up pushing rubbers into pencils into 4 or 5 different areas through the course of a month instead of staying with the same job. And that probably helps a little bit. But most people who work in factories hate Mondays and they love Fridays.
No doubt about that. But Milan, haven't you already seen that to some degree? Y'all were talking earlier about the car industry. And by the way, I had one of the most mundane jobs of all time, and I'll actually tell you about it because it actually involves something that we've also talked about on the network in this show as well, because it was very much road work. I mean, part of what I did for the company was road work in the first place, but this was even more road than usual and all along those lines. But I'm thinking about like the ways in the automobile that we are seeing, like those robotic arms that are creating and designing the cars and all in that space. So in some ways, there are already some manufacturing. Now, I do agree you have to have somebody to program the computer and make sure that the computer is, or the robot is doing it correctly. So there are some human elements to even that part, but we are definitely seeing some kind of ways that the robotic world and the industrial world has been changed by some of this AI and other technology.
Oh, absolutely, Mark. Most people wouldn't think of Tesla as an AI company, but it uses AI in manufacturing. Tesla just opened a factory in Munich. The Munich workers are among the highest paid workers on the planet. So why did Elon Musk go to Munich? Because he's got a trained workforce and he can replace many of the people who are doing the work with AI, with AI equipment. And he's glad to have the trained workforce to which he can draw on. And
Speaking of Elon Musk was in the news recently as well, because apparently Elon Musk, I think it was yesterday, made the statement that we are spiraling into war. He actually made the mistake, and he said that we are making a catastrophic mistake in the way that we are handling, I think, both Ukraine and Israel. So he made that statement as of, I believe it was yesterday evening, and all along those lines. So what is y'all's thoughts around that? Does he have a valid point? Because he is thinking that we are spiraling into a situation that we can't get out of, including possibly heading
I'd like
into
to change
World
the
War
topic back a little bit because, I'm not a big fan of what Elon Musk says about much. And I think that I wanted to say one thing about, you're taught when you go to MBA, how great Henry Ford was when producing the assembly line. But do you know anybody that worked on that assembly line? Those assembly lines were soul crushing experiences.
Yeah.
And so this is what we're talking about replacing. What we have to do is build job creation that is humane. And not just so much as like, how do you crank it out the fastest? And if this person drops dead, then just put the next person in to replace them. Or if a person loses an arm, put a person with 2 arms in there. This has been a philosophy that goes back to some of Adam Smith's productivity. The what I call the unregulated free market capitalism, which was doomed to fail, and it's the seeds of its own destruction were sown within it. But when we have regulations, and they were clever enough to put in management structures, so it wasn't just owner and worker, but then you had a manager and an assistant manager and then a foreman, and so you had all of these hierarchies. And so we did all these things, including safety measures that make it more expensive to be a worker in America than it does in, say, Vietnam or in Vietnam. And so all of these go into whether or not we're creating humane jobs with the use of artificial intelligence, or whether we're just trying to create places where make more money for the owners of stocks.
Are both possible? Are both possible? You mentioned Henry Ford as creating an environment where there were a lot of unhappy people, but Henry Ford wanted his workers to earn enough money to buy the product that they were making.
Absolutely, he did.
The Wall Street Journal had an article about that, saying that Henry Ford is going to destroy capitalism because the workers were able to afford to buy what they were making. And so, yeah, and so the Henry
Everybody's got an opinion. It doesn't mean that it has any validity. But the idea is that we have to change the way we think. We have to change our minds about how job construction is done in this country. If we're going to have citizens that have the happiness, and Henry Ford was not an admirable man, but the idea that the employees could afford to buy your own product, that's hardly revolutionary.
It's not revolutionary at all. Do you know how you've heard me talk about it before, Jim? I don't know that Milan has, but there is various communities around the country that are called Black Wall Streets, and that is areas that were very much centered around Black development and all along those lines. One of those is actually here where I live at in Durham, North Carolina, and there is a connection between that Black Wall Street and the notion of the robber barons, because I don't know if y'all are aware of this, but sometimes education isn't always in the academic field. You don't always learn from the academics, and sometimes you learn from business coaches. So one of the founders of the Black Wall Street here in Durham, if I'm remembering his name correctly, was a gentleman named Mr. Merrick. If you study Mr. Merrick, you'll find that Mr. Merrick was a barber. So he was a barber, and one of the people whose hairs he cut was Mr. Duke of Duke University. So he was learning while Mr. Duke was having business deals with like the Vanderbilts and the robber barons, all of these business skills that he then brought back to his neighborhood, which created the Black Wall Street. So like I said, he literally was learning from his client, because his client was Mr. Duke. So he was cutting his hair, and I'm sure Mr. Duke was over there, as many robber barons and many business people are cutting these deals, and he's sitting there cutting their hair, but also listening and learning, because sometimes the greatest education you can have can be from listening and learning, and not necessarily from going to these high-ranked schools. Not knocking the Fuquays, because Fuquay is a major one here at Duke. I know Stanford's got a major business school, so I'm not knocking the business schools if that's what you want to go to. But sometimes you can learn from practical skills as well and everything. And I was just going to mention really quickly, and then I'll let y'all go back to the conversation. I said earlier that I had a very rote job. Well, there's two rote jobs that I have. One is that I've done testing, and that's they give you a rubric, you follow the rubric, so that can be very rote work for that particular company. When the pandemic took place, they had to pivot. Companies have to pivot, and one of the ways that they pivoted was they actually did the packaging for a particular subject and all along those lines. Because, we just came out of this Notion and everything. And this is not the company that I was packaging for, but I'm just giving you an example of what it was. But this is called a COVID kit and all along those lines. So literally that's what they pivoted it to. They had all of us highly educated people that decided to go to work for the company at that time, go and literally packages like this. So this is a different package than the one that we were using, but they literally would have us. And if I open it up, and I don't feel like opening it up now, you will see there's a number of other things. So that's what we were doing, is we were making sure that the swab and the number of other elements within that kit were in there.
Do what you have to do, right?
4 or 5 months. It was a very noble job that needed to be done during that time. But I can also tell you that it was very road work and very mundane work as well. Because you can't imagine. I'm sure you can, Jim. Go in there and going like, how many times do we have to stick this in here?
That's why I became such a good chess player, is because I had rote work assignments when I was young. And so I had to stimulate my mind somehow. And so that was one of the reasons I kept up and playing chess, because it was stimulating mentally. My job was not. And it wasn't until later in life that I got into jobs that kept my focus. I was intently focused the entire day and exhausted at the end of it.
Yeah, right.
Not from physical work either.
Well, could a lot of the problems that we're describing here today be solved by an appropriate guaranteed annual income, which did not require a means test? And an example that I used previously was our highways. Our highways were public highways are paid for by the taxpayer, and everybody gets to use them, whether they drive 1,000 miles a year or 50,000 miles a year. The same applies to everybody. Everybody gets the benefit of the existence of those highways.
That's right.
A guaranteed annual income at the right amount without requiring a means test, because administering those means tests is expensive, costly, and not very valuable. So without a means test, the right amount of a guaranteed annual income, would that help some of these problems? Are there a lot of women out there who are living in an unhappy marriage because they can't afford to leave? And if they had a guaranteed annual income, they might be able to. With a job plus the guaranteed annual income, they might give them the freedom which now they don't have. So my question to you is the world ready for a guaranteed annual income? When I was a student, I worked on a railroad 60 hours a week. That was the standard, 60 hours a week. That was 50 years ago. Now, where standard is 40 hours a week, and somewhere in Sweden, I think it is, they're talking about a 30-hour week. Yeah. The 40-hour week people are more productive than the 60-hour week.
No, I know what you're saying, but Milan, but the question, because I was going to bring this up as well, definitely something else I was going to bring if Sasha was able to join us and everything, but with the universal wage, or with this kind of notion of the having a kind of universal system and everything, how do we counter what we just recently had happened here in the U.S.? Because I think it was 4 days ago, or at the end of last week, that they said that the national credit card debt, we talk about the debt in general, but the credit card debt, I'm not talking about the rest of the debt, exceeded $1 trillion for the first time ever. So like I said, we got a lot of people that are depending on credit cards and are living off of credit cards and debit cards. I mean, I just bought some items yesterday. I definitely use my debit card.
Well, part of that problem was that we had the interest rates near zero, so borrowing made sense. Borrowing made a lot of sense for years. And so we're reaping the what that was sowed at that time with that policy. But Mark, I had a guest, Michael Tanner, who was a senior fellow of the Cato Institute for 29 years. And he thought that he advocates for the way to attack poverty is by giving people money. Mm-hmm. And he told me on the show that there have been many studies. People think that they will just spend it on drugs or alcohol or cigarettes or something like that. And that's not the case. There's no more examples of people that are poor doing that than there are people that are middle income or what have you. The people that do that are all across the demographic spheres. So, what we have is a lack of willingness to look at different approaches. And what we have is a preset mindset about how this is supposed to work. And we're not willing to listen to new ideas. And that's one of the things that we have to change. The idea that Milan just suggested, a candidate for president in 2016, Andrew Yang, suggested it as well, and was vilified by a lot of the people on the far right, and for saying that. But at least somebody was saying it. At least one candidate had the nerve to say it out loud. It's something that should be on the table.
No, and definitely should be on the table. Something else should be on the table. And it was actually something that Biden has talked about. Other people have talked about it as well. And apparently there was a group of activists in the African-American community that actually didn't just talk about it, because sometimes you get tired of people just talking about it and you need to do something about it. So there is a notion of debt relief, and a lot of students are in major debt because of student loans. So there is a group of activists that it was announced earlier today, because they know a lot of students they say it's 45.5 million Americans owe more than 1.7 trillion US dollars in outstanding student loans. So there is a group called the Debt Collective. It's a union of debtors in the nation, and they stepped up to ease nearly 10 million of their debt recently, and all along those lines. And definitely
that's a little bit more complicated a problem, but that is along those same lines. Debt relief. How do people get into debt? There's a lot of people who said, well, if you get into debt, you're to blame. You belong in jail. We used to have debtors' prisons. We don't do that anymore. But what we don't do is guide people and educate people about what their best choices are when they're young. And that's something that we need to rethink, how we get people. Is it wise for all of these people to get a higher level of education?
No, we definitely got to look at trade schools. There's no doubt about that. And there was even what this group did is they literally, it's only a small amount, but 2,770 former college students at what is considered one of the Harvards of the African American community, that being Morehouse College, they just
Yes.
literally came in there and wiped out their debt. So that debt is gone. They paid off the debt. They brought in a group called the Roland Jubilee Fund, which is an organization set up for only social welfare to buy that debt out. So I can only imagine that when I had graduated back in the mid 80s, if somebody had come and erased that debt, how much further along I might be if I was starting from that ground versus
an unforgivable indictment both against Canada and the United States is here are some of the wealthiest countries in history, and the average student loan, the average dental student today graduates with a debt of $300,000.
So it's insane.
So now all Scandinavian countries educate their students higher education at the cost of the government. The government sees that as an investment, which it is, because people who are more educated earn more money and they pay more in income taxes, so the government gets that money back. The poorest countries in the communist countries in the world educate their people at the expense of the government. Cuba, you can get a higher education in Cuba, and any communist country, Bulgaria, Romania, you name it, at the expense of the government gets that money back. Why do we not have that in Canada and the United States?
Yeah, I don't have the answer to that, except that I think that we have to be able to talk to one another and change each other's minds without being so harsh and so extreme on any side of an issue. You know, if we can calmly speak to one another again, as we did one day in the past, where we used to talk across the aisle, as they say, because I found that the people that identified as Republicans were more towards the center, and the people that identified as the Democrats were more towards the center, had so much more in common than they had in difference. But it's the extremists when they get in charge, and they say anything. It's like, if you say, I want to do this, that's socialist. You know, this labeling, or that's communist, or that's this, or that's that. You know, the labeling interferes with our intelligence. So it short circuits their frontal lobes, and it has us. We're operating on our instinctive amygdala in the back of our heads instead of the frontal lobes in the front of our heads, where we have rational thought. And deprived of rational thought, our decision making is poor, and that's been what we see in Congress is everyone yelling instead of talking. And once we have to get back to being able to sit down, regardless of party, and talk about what's good for the country. And when we can once again do that, where the extremists are not taking over the party, like we see in the House, in the Republican Party right now, they can't even elect a speaker.
Yeah,
that's because there's 8 or 10 extremists that are keeping them from agreeing. They would rather see dysfunction than someone that they didn't want, that didn't agree with them. They would rather see chaos.
The Speaker of the House, if the president can't function because he's assassinated or unable to function, the vice president takes over. If the vice president is unable to function, the Speaker of the House has a very important role.
It is.
And being unable to select one speaks volumes about how it's more important to toe the party line than it is to work in the interest of the nation.
And markets do not like uncertainty. And what's more uncertain than we don't know who the speaker is?
But I just saw something, and speaking of industries and everything, I just saw something that actually shocked me, because it was not in the House, because the House is still dysfunctional. But there was a unanimous vote, which I think is like almost a unicorn these days, because it's so rare and everything, to actually approve a appointment. So it is actually a very important appointment. So I was surprised that apparently in the Senate, Republicans and Democrats came together and they agreed by a vote of, I want to say 100-0, or however many there are in that space, to approve the FAA director. So the Federal Aviation is a important role, because definitely we have to fly around not just the country but around the world. But that director was approved in the Senate, and I saw that in the news earlier today. And that is, in my mind, a very vital role. It's also a very difficult field, because I want to say that they say that air traffic controllers is one of the most stressful jobs that exist in.
But appointments in general were being held up. They were being held up by one particular person who is just saying that he didn't want any appointments until he got his way. He was going to hold his breath until he turned blue, and basically is the mentality. And so you have to get around these procedural problems, which, you know, any good citizen would not act that way. And yet we have elected officials acting that way. Is, you know, okay, I'm outvoted. I don't agree with the vote, but the majority that has decided to support this person. Get out of the way. Go on to the next issue.
And by the way, this job, because like I said, they confirmed him as the new administrator, but that role had been vacant. Are y'all ready for this, Milan and Jim? That role, and I just said it's the role of getting people around, not just the nation, but around the world, had been vacant for 18 months. So Michael Whitaker finally got the job. And will
appointments have been going unappointed for months and months, stretching into years,
right,
because people just can't know how a democracy works. And when you're in the minority, you have to say, well, I didn't get my way, but I'm going to keep arguing, keep fighting for my way. But right now, I didn't win. But we have these people that are they're a minority of the Republican Party that have taken control of it. And this is what we just have to stop electing these radicals and extremists to office. And it's on the voters. The voters have to wake up and take charge. Put the country back onto the direction that we once were on. And maybe we were kidding ourselves, but that's what we thought.
Yeah, we thought we were doing that, and definitely I know we're winding down, but we also don't need to have necessarily what I call life appointments, because even here in North Carolina, our Secretary of State, I think, is going on her 23rd or 25th year, and all along those lines.
Term limits, that's another subject.
Yeah.
But, you know, we are going up against the debt, the national debt crisis again in November. And if we can't get our acts together, the markets are going to hate that. So at some point in time, we're going to have to act like grown-ups.
We need less bureaucracy.
Yes.
Bureaucracy is costly. The number one objective of any bureaucracy is to expand itself and to grow. And whatever it's I don't know if I mentioned to you, I built a little pond a while ago, about a third of an acre pond, stocked it with fish. I had to divert a stream about this wide into my pond, and the water will go over the flume and back into the stream. So I applied for permission to do that, and 5 suits came to take a look at 5. Today it would be 8 suits, wouldn't it? And you know, I was young and inexperienced. Today I would say to them, am I paying 5 of you guys to do the job that one guy could do? And so bureaucracies do that, and they keep on growing. And Thomas Jefferson wanted to see minimal government. The idea of minimal government died with Thomas Jefferson, didn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And Mark, I know we have to go, but I wanted to say that we wish Sasha the best and hope everything works out.
Yeah, we wish Sasha the best, and hopefully that things are going well, and hopefully he'll be back with us on next week as well. The only thing is, I wind down, I was going to salute is that sometimes it is good seeing businesses, and we talk about business and investment here, that have exceeded their expectations. So there is a major league, a sports league, that just recently crowned their champion, a 2-time champion from the West Coast, that being the Las Vegas Ace and everything. But a lot of people had their doubts about the Women's Basketball League when it was formed back in 1996. So we are now on 2023. They're ready to get ready to almost.
I watched the finals. It's exciting basketball.
Well, there's never been a better time. There's never been a better time in history to need healthcare. Sooner or later, we are going to need it. And Nava Star, Sasha's wife, is in such a position now. So we wish her well.
Yeah.
Your timing is perfect. Couldn't be better. Yeah.
Yes.
Definitely. And on that note, we're going to get on out of here. Jim, you did a great job of leading the charge with Sasha and here and all along those lines. So
I'm glad to see you.
You did a great job and all in that space. And I'm also looking forward to seeing who your guest is for Change Your Mind on this coming Friday. So I know that you're working on some new conversations.
I'll get right on that.
All right. Sounds good. Right now, we're going to get on out of here. And like I said, we're hoping to see Sasha on both next week on this show, and hopefully we'll also be seeing them on tomorrow because I know we'll be recording the chess show as well. So we do have that coming up also. So get ready to get on out of here, and we'll be having other shows on the network as well. So stay tuned to podtv.tv. You can catch it on Roku. You can catch it on Amazon Fire. You can catch it on the website that I just mentioned, podtv.tv. And there are all kinds of amazing shows. Sasha's got a number of shows that he does, including one on Ukraine and Russia and China that is on every Tuesday and Friday at 11 o'clock. So there are a number of shows that are existing, including, like I said, Jim Show. And who knows, we might even roll out a Milan show about his views at some point or another as well. So there might have to be a Milan spinoff at some point, but I'll have to talk to the leadership. But hey, if Jim can have a spinoff, I think Milan should have a spinoff also.
Thank you.
Bye.